It's stolen.
Correct.
Yep.
So how is that any different to a company taking people's art for free to train their model? They are making something else with it, yes, but they're still taking something.
Because your analogy is flawed. If your logic is that streamlining texture files and things like that is a net negative, then how do you feel about Unreal Engine? Is AI bad for video games? This is a very controversial topic, Max.
Yes,
and as per usual, I end up on the fringe of that. And I look forward to all the delightful commentary about how wrong I am from you.
Oh, yeah, the commenters are going to love this one.
Yes, well, we shall see. We shall see. I think I'm going to provide a very nuanced perspective on this. Of course, if it's not already obvious, I'm taking the position that no, AI is not bad for video games. What about yourself?
Well, obviously, I have to go yes. Then it's awful. I hate to break it to you, mate. It is fucking awful.
Okay. Well, we shall see if that holds up to scrutiny. I think a good start for this is that I don't think either of us are necessarily talking about AI in the application of artificial intelligence. Of course, that would be stupid. Games require artificial intelligence to perform and exist in all capacity.
Right.
We're specifically talking about the use of external tools, generative tools in the creative and production process of video games, which is obviously a hot button topic at the moment. Hence why we're discussing it. But Max, I think it makes sense for you to, because you're pressing the affirmative that yes, it is bad. I feel like you should start to present the case against AI.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's taking away jobs. Let's get that 100% clear. The job market in game development is already extremely competitive, especially in this country. Good luck finding anything of any decent value. But now we've got this massive generative thing which takes off significant workloads. Look, AI for a lot of things is great. Don't get me wrong, but when you're starting to take away artists' jobs, that's when I have a problem.
Okay, well, I feel like the art is definitely the stalwart, to be fair, of your position. Like art and generative art is definitely like the main point of controversy with people for example, like recent game Crimson Desert came out, got very good reviews, very positive reviews, but one controversy they encountered at launch was people discovered that they were using AI placeholder art in their in-game housing and whatnot.
But placeholder, so it wasn't meant to be discovered.
Well, that's what they say, but people are saying that because the controversy, they're now going back and redoing it only because of the controversy. So we don't know for sure, but regardless of whether it's placeholder or not, it caused a lot of a stir. Now, I think it's a bit of a deceptive situation with the AI controversy and this prompt in general, because I see AI as one of many tools. I don't even necessarily think it's good or bad. I just see it as another tool in the toolbox of a developer trying to make their game. And like any tool in your toolbox, I feel like if you are overly reliant upon it, the end product is bad fundamentally. And so I don't necessarily see AI as good or bad. I just see it as the next tool that they can be used. But for art purposes, right, for when it comes to generative art, can you explain to me fundamentally why it is bad? Like, why is it a bad thing for me to go on my computer and generate a piece of art as opposed to paying someone, $10.99 to do it for me?
Yeah. Oh, as opposed to paying someone else to do it? Well, when you have, look, is art meant to be a human thing? I guess it really goes back to what you define as art. For me personally, I'd say that when you're talking about art, that is typically human created. And when you take, like, art is soul, art is beauty and wonder and all those other words. But when you just get a computer to generate it based on what it thinks art should look like, that's sort of when you go, well, then what's the point? Like, art is meant to be created by humans for other humans. And when it's not, then that's sort of, it just doesn't feel right. Like, sure, there may not be anything inherently wrong per se, but when you are playing video games for the human connection in a way, like you're enjoying another a team of humans' work, and you're taking that away, like, it just doesn't feel right,
I mean, I can kind of understand what you're getting at, and I do personally see less value, so to speak, in a creation done via AI versus something that's handcrafted. But I don't see this utility taking away any value. So for an example I give is, I feel like AI currently, as it in its current form, is really effective at duplicating simplistic patterns. So for example, if I did a stick figure drawing and I made that my style, and then I took, 10, 15 different drawings and I put it into my generative AI tool and said, I want you to recreate this, but do this instead. And it would basically duplicate the style, but then do what else I'm asking of it. I don't see, I see it being effective for that purpose, but I don't see it very effective at recreating what I'd call advanced art, quote unquote. So, for example, there's a bunch of commissions that you can do through Twitter where people will basically, they're just freelance artists, and you can go to them, look at their portfolio and say, oh, I like that art. I want you to do X, Y, or Z. And a lot of these artists are doing things that are hyper advanced. Like there's a lot of intricate detailing. There's a lot of creative elements. And sure, if I entered in a bunch of their portfolio into an AI generator, it may generate something akin to it, but I would say it would fail to rebroadcast what the original captures. And so I don't see AI coming in and infringing upon the jobs of people where there is authentic voice in their art, because there will never be a substitute for the original if the original is coveted enough. And what I mean by that is, let's take Van Gogh, for example, right? If he was alive today, sure, I could enter in his art into a generative tool and I could make something very akin to it. I could make something that's very similar in style because that's what it's interpreting. But that wouldn't affect Van Gogh's position as an artist, because everyone would want to go to the original for the value that creates. And so I don't really see it impacting jobs of people that are doing extremely advanced artwork in the way you're claiming.
So go back to that point that you just made. You don't see people flocking to replicas of humanity is essentially the core of your argument there. Would you agree?
No, I think my core argument is basically there is an underlying value to human art versus AI that AI will never infringe upon. And I see AI mainly impacting jobs of people that are doing quote unquote basic art that is easily replicated.
Well, I mean, in video games, there is no, take away edge cases. Most of the art done would just be texture files and assets, right? Like and texture files, you'd make X number of them for a game, and they're very small individual things. Like let's say you're building a gravel ground, say, you're going to have like a bunch of different textures. You're going to have your bitmap textures. You're going to have all those other depth maps, etc. So yeah, sure, it could speed it up, but like, doesn't it take away the humanity when you are getting just a computer to say, hey, let's just generate all of those? Yes, I see the time save, 100% agree. But if your argument is it won't take away from people, then I'm not quite sure I'm following, nor do I agree with you on that.
Well, if your logic is that streamlining texture files and things like that is a net negative, then how do you feel about Unreal Engine? Because fundamentally, one of my core theses of my argument is that I don't see it being very different importing assets and texture files from Unreal Engine's community marketplace versus essentially generating it yourself. Like, I don't really understand the difference between the two.
I mean, it really again goes back to what I said at the start. Like, what do you deem as art? Like, is a texture file art to you? And if it's just a utility as a part of a game, then yeah, I could see your argument. But if we again refer back to what I said as well, if we are to say that video games are art, and if you define art as something that is made by humans for other humans, which is probably what I would sit closer to, then like it just leaves an ick, I guess, when I find out, like, if there's one or two things, sure, that's fine. Like, we've all used AI for things. Like, I have, you have. There's no guilt in that. But when you are creating an entire product or majority product for the purpose of just making money, if that makes sense, like there's no love behind it in the pursuit of money. It is just purely for making money. And so then it just sort of screams laziness, and therefore it's not really art, if that makes sense.
Well, to be honest, though, I see art in video games as the total creation, right? Like the end product, right? So like it's not necessarily like one texture or one piece of art in the game. It's like the totality of the game itself, right? Like I think when I think of a finished product like I don't know, Skyrim, right? I'm thinking of
Mm,
the music, right? That's one element. I'm thinking of like the writing. That's another element. I'm thinking of how the game looks visually, like the art aesthetic. That's like another element.
mm,
Like it's multiple elements coming in tandem to create a finished product. And so let's go
mm,
back as an example, right? The Crimson Desert controversy surrounded
mm,
them using AI generated art to fill out basically random frames in a house, right? So in their
mm,
housing, players would walk through and like you'd see random frames on the wall, and in those frames would be AI generated images that they created. Why
mm.
why do you see that as a net negative?
I can't really speak to this exact scenario because I don't know about it. This is the first time hearing of it, to be honest with you. But as a concept, I can speak to if I went into this location in the game and saw that, it would make me start to wonder what else was done in a time crunch. What else pushed these developers to save that time? Look, ultimately, I do think I do. Again, I don't know the context of this exact scene in the game, so maybe it serves its purpose. I genuinely don't know, but again, as just a general concept, I think it's just an ick. Like it sort of makes me go, well, if they were lazy, let's say, I don't know if that's the case again, but if they were lazy enough to do it for this scenario, why wouldn't they do it everywhere else? You know?
I don't see it as being, because my logic is, right, if you're filling
Mm,
in, background noise in a video game,
mm.
that is entirely unimportant. Like these images that are on the walls aren't like, don't have some significance to the story or the game. They're basically
Okay,
just
that changes it a
visual
little bit. Yeah.
filler, right? I
Yep.
don't
Yep.
see the value in paying someone ample amounts of money to fill that frame
Mm,
in versus just generating it. Like to be
mm,
frank with you, like that sounds a bit callous, but I don't see the net value that someone brings to a video game as opposed
mm,
to just using AI to generate an image when the asset in question has very little relevance to what the player is experiencing. It's essentially just
mm,
trying to continue the immersion that they're trying to build by having a house. But
mm.
I mean, it doesn't actually serve any net negative to me if you're using AI to generate that one thing in the house because you don't want to pay someone to do it. I don't see that as a problem personally.
Mm. Again, like as you said, you see the work of art being the total final product, right? So I guess the little individual tiny parts of it will never make up the holistic picture, right? Like I understand that argument, but if you're never going to have a pure product, right? And for me, like again, I don't know this specific thing. I don't even know how big this game is. Like, is it? I presume it's a fairly large production, right?
Yeah, it's a massive open world RPG.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So like yeah, okay, if it's on that size, then it probably won't matter in my view. Like, but I would rather, and I guess it goes back to our fundamental core beliefs in that I would rather pay someone a day's work to get those pieces of art in there. So number one, you avoid this controversy, which you could only know in hindsight, sure, but number two, like it just makes the product feel more human, more. I would feel more connected as a player if I saw that and it was an AI and I knew that it wasn't. If that would be sort of where I would conclude it.
Yeah, I see. I don't see that as raising to the threshold of bad, right? Like, is
No,
AI
I
bad
wouldn't
for
think so.
video games? Like in that
No.
example, that is a use of AI in video games, and
Mm,
I don't see
mm.
that as being bad at all. Going back to our
Well,
original prompt.
it didn't destroy that game's reputation, did it? It's still a fantastic product that will probably go on to win awards, right?
Presumably, yes.
Mm, mm. So, I mean, so I guess by the market of free ideas, it probably didn't affect it all that much. And so, therefore, well, if we go with what the market says, then it clearly didn't matter all that much in the totality of the product. But when you talk more about the industry as a whole and creativity slowly being taken away, like etched away, right now it's only doing this, but like AI's capabilities are only going to get more refined from here, then what is it to say in 5 years' time where Unity or Unreal supports building a game like you can a website right now with Claude Code? Like, what's to say you can't then just one person just sit down and, instead of a team building a game, the AI does everything? And like, is that a problem? Well, I mean, I'd say yes, because I like the idea that I'm playing something made by humans. But I guess for you, you probably don't agree with that.
Okay, well, I feel like that's a different concept though. Like, I think the argument you're making is essentially that you're essentially arguing that AI is bad if a significant portion of the product is AI based, right? But if the initial prompt is AI bad for video games, fundamentally, then I feel like you've kind of stepped back on your position because you've acknowledged that AI has some use case, whether it's minor or extremely minor. You've acknowledged that there's some use case for AI in video games, and therefore you can't really say AI is fundamentally bad. You can only suggest that AI has a degree of being bad when it takes up a significant portion of a game's development, right? Like, whatever the threshold is, let's say it's 30%. If 30% of the game or above is AI based, then you think it's bad. Then surely you acknowledge that anything before then, it has some utility, no?
I mean, I think I'm absolutely answering the question there. Is AI bad for video games? I think that extends to the industry, and the future of the industry, because junior developers aren't able to get jobs, right? But to answer your remind me what your question at the end there was.
Well, I'm saying that you kind of acknowledge, right, by arguing from the point that you're concerned that AI is essentially going to make games 100% or near 100%. You're essentially arguing a fringe case, because if you accept even that if 10% of a game was made using AI, or 5% or 3%, you're essentially admitting that AI has some utility, and therefore AI can't just be bad for video games. It's only bad at a certain percentage level, right, of use.
No, not necessarily, because I again would suggest, or would stand on my opinion that I would rather a game not have it, because then it feels more human. I'd feel more connected to it in that sense. I think that's more just a general thought that, yeah, sure, at some point we could generate entire games with a singular prompt, right? And you can actually kind of do that now, but like, it has utility. Absolutely agree with that. Like, writing scripts with it, the amount of time that could be saved in production would be massive. I see the value in using generative AI for coding, as long as you can read what it's outputting, and you can actually understand what it's given you. That's where I see the utility, writing the scripts and any other, to be clear, coding scripts. So like, interaction code, that sort of thing. That's good, in my opinion. But I just cannot get over when it comes to the art, the actual physical thing that you see, as being, I don't know. I think it's just artists for me. I don't think should be touched in industries, because it's a human based thing, whereas coding has always been, yes, there's an art form to it, but it's got to be realistic. It's quite difficult to create an entire video game, and takes hundreds of thousands of man hours, and if we can cut some of that out, then that would probably be better for the industry, because you might be reducing crunch in certain situations.
So if it's the case though that you're opposed to art, you're opposed to AI being used in art, period. Let me ask more of because I'm coming at this once again that AI is a tool in the toolbox. So I don't think it should be used to a dramatic degree, but I do think it can be used for things that don't necessarily serve an impediment to the video game itself, but need to be done regardless. So let's go back to an earlier example, right? Like, we're talking about a cobblestone road, right? And you need to make a texture for that road. So let's assume that every other piece of art in the game is made by a human, right? An actual team of artists handmade it. Then you have a cobblestone road where essentially, like, for your style, let's say you already have the other art and you're like, okay, this aesthetic is pretty simple. We just need a very basic cobblestone road texture, right? A very basic one that's just going to go for this one bridge, right? And we think, okay, economically speaking, does it make sense to get those artists back in, or does it make more sense to take their other, drawings, concept design, etc., put it into an AI model and just get this bridge art done in the next 30 seconds because we want to get it done by this date, etc. Do you see that as being bad? Do you see that fundamentally as being a net negative?
Well, again, going back to my other argument, if you had to, it would detract from the product a little bit. But if it's only one part, then it can't then be an AI generated product. There's one piece of it. As I said, it would make me feel a little bit icky, but it wouldn't put me off the entire thing, knowing that this one part of the game that is AI generated. I wouldn't understand the context. I'm certain of that in reality, but it would one or two things you kind of go, ugh, I wish I hadn't done that. Ick. Oh well. But I think my argument really goes down to how much, and I couldn't put a quantitative number on that, but it definitely is. There is a threshold at which you kind of start to go, well, what is the purpose of this art?
And see, that's kind of the crux of my argument, though, is you acknowledge that there's a threshold of acceptability with its use, because you acknowledge it can save time, it can do this, it can do that, but simultaneously you're arguing that it's bad for video games, and that's what I don't understand. Like, surely if the threshold's 0.0001%, where you acknowledge, okay, I could see that being handy to get it done, or do this, or do that, surely you acknowledge that it's not it's not flatly bad for the industry. It's more so flatly bad for the industry if it exceeds that percentage.
What's your point of getting what's your
my point is you've kind of acknowledged that your position is wrong, because what you've said is, I can understand if you don't know what the percentage is specifically, but if it's used in minor cases, it's not going to affect your experience. Therefore, it can't be bad for video games.
No,
flatly.
I didn't say it wouldn't affect it. I said it would make me feel a bit icky that they're using something other than human creativity to produce a part of this game. But no, it wouldn't make me then downvote it on Steam and refund it. No, if just a single cobblestone road has been like a texture has been generated for it, sure, that's different. But there is a threshold, and I think it really goes down to factors, like a very large number of factors, and the motive behind that game, right? Like if we were to say make a fully AI slop game, right? We would both probably acknowledge that that's not ideal, right?
Yeah.
But then you're on total other end, if you're just generating like what Crimson Desert, what was it? Sorry, Crimson
Desert, yeah.
Crimson Desert. If you're generating something that like what Crimson Desert did, then you sort of go, ick, oh well, it doesn't affect the entirety of the game. But when you start to talk about how much and what is the motives behind using that, then I think that changed the argument.
Well, and I guess that's where we differ, because, to be honest, my threshold is probably in the neighborhood of like 0.8% AI use case. Like, for Crimson Desert, like
0.8?
Yeah, probably in the neighborhood of 0.8 to 1.2 or something like that. That's a very, very specific number, but
very specific.
That I'm plucking out of thin fucking air. But
really,
but for me, I don't see it as a net negative for the developers behind Crimson Desert, although I'm sure they're going to replace it after the controversy. I don't see it as net negative for them in this giant open world game where there's a million different systems that they have to spend time developing. I don't see it as a problem for them to fill out a house's decor using AI for some of the artwork. Like, as long as it's in period, I don't see that as being a problem. I'm not, as a player, I don't see my experience being affected negatively by that. But also, I actually kind of see AI improving the experience slightly for immersion, because if they didn't have the extra decor that was created by AI, because they just didn't want to include something made by AI, I actually would think that's slightly worse. Like, if I had to pick between the two, I would choose the AI-generated decor being in the background to create a bit of ambience and immersion versus not having it at all. And therefore, I have to fundamentally argue that it's not bad for video games, because I could see use cases where it is effectively good.
And I guess that's where we differ, because given the choice between nothing or AI-generated art in this specific scenario, I would say I'd rather them not put that in, because it would just leave me with an ick. No, not negative experience, but a negative emotion in that moment. Like, it's not going to turn me off the game fully, but it would just make me go, ugh.
So if you're walking into a house, right, like a house model they've created to get a chest, right? We're going to put this down to its very basic fundamental and the core of what the gamer is experiencing.
It's just a chest in this house.
Let's say you walk into the house to get a chest, right? That's why you defeated the enemy. You're walking into this house for the sole purpose of getting a chest, and you're going to leave, right? And as you're walking through, on the walls, there is nothing. There is nothing on the walls. There is basically a colored wall, and you're walking down the hallway, you get your chest, you leave. Versus a scenario where on the walls there's various artworks that all look in period, in theme, right? But they happen to be AI generated. You see the first scenario as being better solely because they used AI to generate the art on the walls. Whereas
I would have to agree. Yeah. I would say the first. I would much rather, as a player, the first scenario, 100%.
Can you explain a little more why? I don't fundamentally get that, because if the core experience of the player is more important, right? Stripping down what we're talking about, if you're trying to be immersed in this world, if you're trying to do X, Y, Z, and you're trying to experience what the game has to offer, I don't see why having blank walls is a better choice to having walls that are covered in AI generated art. As long as the AI generated art in question is obviously in theme, then I don't see what the issue is. I don't fundamentally get what the problem is.
Because if I knew it was AI, it would just be a bit, I don't really want to see that in my game. It would just be very off-putting, and a little bit, knowing that it was created not by humans, I kind of just go,
Do you think you would, though? Do you think if you were in a game, right, that's all about like this giant open world with all these systems, do you really think for the 3 seconds you've entered that house to get a chest to then leave again, do you really think you would be able to immediately tell, the art on the walls is AI generated, this is garbage?
Well, in this scenario, I'm assuming that I would know that it's AI generated. Otherwise, it kind of is a flawed
it's not though.
Scenario, no?
It's not though, because if you don't know it's AI generated and you're walking through and you feel immersed because, there's art on the walls, you feel like, there's a lot of detail in this game, and you get your chest and you leave, for that split second, you've thought, wow, something that was generated via AI improved my experience with the game, right?
But then you're just saying I would know that it's AI generated.
No, but if you're just a player, right? Because we're talking about, is AI bad for video games, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily need the scenario to have you know it's AI to know whether it's bad or good. We're talking about a feature in the game that was created by AI. So if a normal player walks down that hallway and there's art on the walls, and they think, wow, there's a lot of detail in this game, how cool. They get their chest, they leave the house. For that split second, whether they knew it or not, they acknowledge that something created by AI improved their experience with the game. So going back on the original prompt, how then can it be bad for video games if that was a net positive experience?
Well, then I guess you need to go to the wider industry implications there. Like, are we taking people out of their jobs for such a minuscule gain? You yourself admit that it's a very small thing. You're going in to get a chest and leaving. So why are we replacing humans? Why aren't we just reusing assets from elsewhere in the game? Yes, I don't worry. I understand why you would choose to generate something and save yourself the hours of work for this one little thing. Sure. But like, are we really going to that point? Is it actually a race to the bottom here to just squeeze out every last dollar? Is it becoming that sensitive in the grand scheme of market and capitalism? Like, are we really doing that? Are we saying, no, we don't want an artist for this one little thing? We don't want to give like a junior artist a job. Instead, we're just going to get AI to do it. Like, that just doesn't sit right with me, and I just can't agree that it's a good thing for the industry.
Well, I don't fundamentally understand that position, because when you look at the last, 10, 15 years of game development, budgets have only increased dramatically over the last 10, 15 years. And the reason for that, in part, is because salaries of people behind these games have increased dramatically. And so when you look at that, and people complain constantly about the budgets of video games and how AAA gaming has fundamentally died because of the introduction of microtransactions and the desperate need to make as much money, to squeeze as much blood from the stone as possible, what do you blame in that scenario? Well, you have to blame the rising budget of video games. And what is contributing to that? Probably a lot of features and a lot of bloat that were paid for at the expense of the developer and publisher. And so if you have a tool that saves you a couple $1,000s here, a couple $1,000s there, and in total you end up saving a lot of money, I don't see that as being a net negative. Like, sure, it sounds a bit callous because we're talking about people here and their jobs, but I'm also fundamentally, when it comes to economics, I'm a believer that the market will find other positions for those artists and other positions for those developers that were replaced with AI somewhere else.
Yeah, in another firm that doesn't use AI, would you say?
Well, no, it wouldn't necessarily be the same job. Like, for example, right, like with truck drivers, if a truck driver was replaced via an artificial intelligence, like, based car, right, this is getting slightly off topic, but just an example, right?
Yep, I'll entertain it.
if they were replaced by some form of vehicle that could drive itself, presumably that truck driver would then go find a job in the construction industry somewhere, or would find a job doing something else, right? Like they wouldn't just stay unemployed forever.
Where would they go?
Well, that's the thing. Like eventually, the market would create jobs somewhere else. Eventually,
but not if AI is actively replacing, and the uptake is going back to our actual topic here. If a junior developer wasn't given a job as an artist at any company, right? Because all the junior roles are being replaced by AI in the coming years. Let's just say hypothetically, then how would they even get their foot in the door? They'd have to go into another industry, no?
Maybe so, but would that industry exist 10, 15 years? Like, for example, right? Like being a YouTube artist, right? Someone that makes videos that showing their sketching or whatever. That job didn't really exist for people. It wasn't actually a possible path for a career 10, 15 years ago, right? Sure. And so that's a new thing that has emerged with the advancement of technology and innovation in the industry, right? And so sure, that didn't exist 10, 15 years ago, but I imagine people 10, 15 years ago, if you said, oh, you won't be able to, as an artist, get a job doing this or that, they would say, fuck, well, what am I going to do? But obviously, this is a new avenue that has opened up in the economy 10, 15 years down the line. So I'm not saying we can predict where these people are going to go or what their skill set's going to be used for, but I'm saying that in almost every avenue of work, when one thing gets replaced, another door opens somewhere else. And it's not going to be the exact same thing they were doing before, but it'll still use the same skill set they built up doing the first thing. And
and I get that argument 100%. And I think we're seeing that very significantly in the junior software development space right now. You're going to be seeing a lot more people who are, who you would have 10 years ago just been a software developer go into perhaps implementing AI generated code into systems. And the loss there is that you're losing 5 to 10, but 5 to 10 people who would otherwise help develop those systems replaced with just a chatbot, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and say I don't see the benefit of using generative AI, but when you are talking about people's livelihoods and the ability for someone like our age to go into an industry and get a junior position, and that is no longer an option, that's problematic for me, and I just don't see that as being a gain for the gaming industry.
So if I have a skill set, right? If I have built up a skill set and I was working in an industry and that skill set was no longer needed, it is morally wrong to advance technology because I'm no longer needed. Is that your core argument? Because I feel like that's extremely flawed.
I see where you're going. Absolutely, I see that point. Like it is definitely. There's two sides to this argument, 100%, and I just lean more on the side that I think there needs to be some moderation at the very least. Like as you said, around 1% is the threshold at which you start to go, I'm not comfortable with this in a video game, right? Have I got that?
Well, as a consumer, if it was like, and that's a percentage I'm pulling out of my ass, it might be 5%, it might be 6%. When it comes down to it, if I notice something is AI and I think, ew, because it was done poorly, like if that image that was used in Crimson Desert was like so bad and so in my face that I thought, wow, that's horrible, that's where I go, no, that's bad. Because I don't want to have to think a negative thought when I'm playing a game. I want to just play the game and enjoy it. So if there's something in the background that I'm not noticing that was done by AI and it's not causing me strife, then fantastic. If it's causing me strife, then it's a problem. But it's a very slippery slope you get at here when you start suggesting that we have to employ people to do X, Y, Z, because, I mean, what do you think about newspapers? Like, eventually newspapers are not going to exist, and the little boy on the corner that was selling them for $2 a pop is not going to have a job. But surely you don't want to stop, digital news being a thing, because you don't want to just like halt the progression or innovation in industry to save some jobs here, because presumably that little boy will then go on to get a different job doing something else.
I think that's a slippery. There's nothing, as you have said many times, there's nothing wrong with a slippery slope argument, but I do get what you mean here. I'm all for the advancement of technology, but when you are starting, and I'm not like an old man who's shaking his fist at the cloud saying, fuck you, AI, you should stop advancing. We should cancel all AI development. It's terrible for the world. I mean, in some ways, yes, it is, but environmentally, sure, and I think for junior positions, yeah, absolutely, and yeah, you're right. Humanity has to adapt. It absolutely, and we will adapt. But is it fair? Is it fundamentally fair to be eliminating those people from that job now? It'll happen regardless of whether it's fair or not. But is that right?
What do you mean by fair? What is fair when it comes to
allowing someone
economy?
to actually make a livelihood off their skills? People.
So you have to. When you get a skill, it is now a moral. You have a moral right to own a full-time living off the skill.
No, not necessarily. But if someone chooses to pursue a dream as an artist, because that's what they've been doing their whole life, that's what they enjoy, they should have a right to then be able to go into and make money off that. Sure.
They have a right to make money. I think that's a crazy argument. I mean, look at the greatest artists of the last, 200, 300, 400 years were not doing art because there was a profit motive. They were doing art because art was something of their core belief that they were able to express themselves and I guess comment on society through. They weren't doing it because it was profitable.
If you have a skill, surely and that's what you are good at, surely you have... you should have an option to take to go and monetize that in some sort of job. No,
I think that's a crazy take. Like, think about what you do on a day-to-day basis. Like, for example, me, I do MMA. I have literally no interest or any sort of concept of ever profiting from that. It's just something I enjoy doing on a day-to-day basis. The argument you're making is essentially someone out there must employ me to use my grappling skills and my kickboxing skills because it's a skill set I've built up through many, many hours of pain and torture. Is that the argument you're making for artists? Because I think that's interesting.
I'm a little bit confused. Surely if I am good at something, I should have the ability, if I so wish, to pursue that as a full-time job if it's something that can actually...
You said it was a right. But I think that's crazy.
I misspoke.
Okay, fair enough then. But I don't think you're entitled just because you have a skill set. I could have a very, very good skill set bouncing on my toe. I think that would be ludicrous for someone to suggest to me just by sole virtue of me having this skill that there should be some avenue to profit from it. I think that's crazy. Now, in most cases, yes, there will be avenues to profit from skill sets, but that doesn't mean that you're entitled to it. I think that's craziness.
When it comes to things like artists and
I don't think AI eliminates that. I don't think AI existing eliminates because once again, going back to what I said in the first few lines of this debate, I don't see true artists that are putting significant value forward when it comes to their artwork. Significant that they're putting so much strain on themselves because they're making this amazing artwork because it's very detailed. It's amazing. I don't see their value being usurped by AI. Because I don't see people wanting an AI art to replace what they're doing. I feel like there's a core value flaw when it comes to artwork. If you're doing something that's truly amazing and spectacular, people go, wow, this person is an amazing artist. Like, I don't even know how they did that. I don't see them having the same reaction to an AI-generated artwork from their portfolio. And so there'll always be a flaw of value for those artists that want to go out there and make something that's amazing that people will pay for. And I don't think AI will ever eliminate that because going back to my original example, right, of Van Gogh, if Van Gogh was here today, he could live for the next 200 years of technology and people would still want to pay him to do art because he's Van Gogh and they love his artwork and they want an original from Van Gogh to say they have an original from Van Gogh.
Yeah, so if I say I want my video game to be completely free from AI because I want the intrinsic human value that a fully a product absent of completely void of AI development, is that a bad thing? Like,
well, you can make that choice, but if the prompt is AI is bad for video games, I feel like the burden of proof is on you to demonstrate that AI is actually genuinely bad in its use case video games. And I feel like you kind of acknowledged, Max, throughout this conversation that there is an acceptable level of use of AI. And for me, if there's an acceptable level of use of AI, then it can't be just blanketly bad, can it?
I don't think anything is ever black and white. I fully believe and acknowledge that. I don't think to say that it is absolutely blanket bad. We should kill it all. No, I think that's a very naive argument, because whether we like it or not, that's the reality that we live in now, and it will continue to propagate through all industries, including the video game industry, because it's computer related. But I do think overall that the health of the industry will suffer. Definitely in the short term. It remains to be seen whether medium to long it will. For younger people and for people who are willing to keep their jobs. I mean, we're seeing layoffs all over the tech industry, mainly in the software development, I acknowledge, but we're seeing them everywhere. And it's concerning when you see those signs. Video game development is so closely related that surely at some point we're going to start to see firms replace their lower end staff, even though I hate saying it like that, their junior roles, with artificial intelligence, because it's better for their bottom end. No, like is that the road that we want to go down? Is that something we want to say yes to as a society?
Well, yeah. I mean, if it's effective for the business to stay afloat, I mean, yeah, I don't see a problem not employing people to do a job that could be done by AI without the consumer knowing. Like, if once again, it's different
without the consumer knowing. So you'd rather,
yes, 100%, 100%. If I play a game like, for example, Black Ops 7, which was done with a lot of AI, like they generated significant portions of that game with AI, right? Well, whether they did or not, when people played the game, they immediately knew, because it was so bad. It was so bad that people immediately knew, wow, they used this much AI in their game. That's terrible. That's a problem, because the core consumer is saying the end product is bad. But if the end product is good, and people say, wow, I really enjoy this game is really fun, I love what they did with this and that. No, I don't see it being a problem that in order to make that game, they used AI and maybe had to replace a few jobs with the use of AI. I don't see that being a net negative when the end product is what matters. The end product is the video game I'm purchasing as a consumer, and if the video game is good, then great. I don't happen to care if they used AI or not, because it's another tool in the toolbox, and the end product is good. If the end product is bad, like Black Ops 7, then trash it. I'm not. Why would you do that much use of AI, etc., etc.? Like I don't see it being a clear-cut thing where you can say, well, because they replace these jobs, it's bad. I think that doesn't make any sense.
And I think that's where we'll fundamentally continue to disagree, and we could spend hours talking about it, but I don't think it'll change either our minds. I definitely acknowledge that there are concessions, especially considering that the industry is now, it is irreversible. The AI will be here whether we like it or not, right?
That's true.
We may as well embrace it where we can, and so I definitely get your acknowledgement. Sorry, your point there, and I acknowledge that. But I do think overall, the less human input that we have on a piece of art will fundamentally erode what, or maybe adapt, maybe change. I don't know. But for me, it would erode what art is, which is by humans for humans.
Okay. Well, we'll go on one last point, and then we'll conclude.
Closing arguments.
Yeah, I guess closing argument. On that, though, right? We're talking very, very... the scope we're talking about is very narrow. We're specifically talking about, like, art, and a cobblestone road was one example, and, like, painting was another example, and you're talking about junior developer roles. Like, what do you say if... Because in the development process of a video game, there's a lot of menial tasks. What, for example, like, presumably they use a lot of Excel sheets or things like that to like,
Excel?
Map out. Yeah, they probably do. They probably, like, have a giant list of things, and they, like, organize.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, my bad.
If I'm in a development team and I use AI to automatically shuffle my Excel spreadsheet to organize it better for the meeting tomorrow, that's a use case of AI in video games, because I'm working in the video game industry and I'm using AI. Is that also bad?
I point back to what I said before. I think for coding, and the reason that I make the distinction between coding and art is code. Well, I think it goes back to that I use it for coding, and I think if I were to sit here, it would be soapboxing and benefit nobody. I do use AI for coding things, in full products at work. So it definitely would be wrong for me to say, yeah, no, it's totally bad in that sense. But where my argument lies is the the visual aspects and how we actually interact with the game. I think when it comes to code, it's a bit different. It's a different concept because.
But why is that? If it replaces jobs, like say, what if there was a person that they employed full time to organize all their Excel spreadsheets and all their PowerPoint presentations that has now been replaced through an AI tool? Do you think that's good or bad? Because earlier you made the argument that it's bad.
I would still think it's bad. I think that it sucks that someone lost their job to a computer. I think that sucks. And, if I were the owner of a company, I'd have to consider very significantly the effect that would have on that person. I'm replacing.
So you have a moral obligation as an employer to employ someone to do a job that could be done for essentially $10.
I disagree. I do. Sorry. No, I don't have a moral obligation to keep that person employed, but I would have a moral obligation to seriously consider whether the value of however much money we're paying that person is worth to me or them. If that person can do it better, which may or may not be the case, then why wouldn't I keep that person employed? But if it's clear to me that the AI has all these benefits, then I would seriously have to start considering, well, to move aside from the actual, I have to move on to the moral side of it. Like, am I going to put this person out of a job? And how am I going to tell this person they're being replaced by AI? Like that's not a pleasant situation or conversation to have, unfortunately.
So I'm honestly, I'm really confused now, because earlier you were making the argument that the loss of jobs is a massive problem, right? And in this scenario, once again, like the PowerPoint, Excel scenario, because it is realistic. Like, there are tons of people employed to do very menial jobs and data entry jobs that AI can essentially replace with a 10-second shuffle, right? I don't see what the moral, I don't see you being, as an employer, being morally obliged to pay someone because they went a role before. Like, if their role is redundant, then you should make them redundant and they can go off and find a new thing to do. Like, I don't see you having a moral obligation because they're being replaced by AI to not replace them if they're costing your firm $60,000 a year or something. Like, whatever the minimum wage is, like, regardless, no matter how you slice it, if their job is data entry and it's menial data entry, it doesn't require any sort of thought process. No, I don't see it being bad for video games to not pay that person $50,000 a year to do the job that could be done for $10 a month.
I think it. When it comes down to that, yeah, sure. But it goes back to, I'd have to seriously consider, like, is this the direction I want? Like, do I actually want to put this person out of a job, or is there something else I can give this person in the firm? Yeah, but at the end of the day, I do get your point. Like, it's one of those decisions that I would hate to make, I think is my argument.
There's one other thing, Max, I want to touch on here. And it's the argument people make when they say that AI art specifically is stealing from artists, because in order to train the model, you kind of have to train it on artwork that already exists. And I don't know about you, but I very much disagree with that concept. Before we continue, do you agree or disagree with that notion? Because it does contribute to, is AI bad for video games? Because one of the arguments they say is using AI generated art in video games is bad because it steals from artists. What do you say?
Yeah, I think that's more of a complaint about the companies that are making the AI software. I do think it's stealing it fundamentally, yes, because you are pulling all of this data in order to train something on its likeness, 100%. But ultimately, is that bad for the video game thing? I don't really. I have to put some more thought behind that, because I'm not really like, they're related loosely.
Well, the reason I'm getting at this is where they're saying that the tool itself wouldn't work. So if I use the tool in a video game, the tool itself wouldn't work if it wasn't trained on stolen art, essentially. And so the argument they're making is that, well, AI art in video games is fundamentally immoral because it wouldn't exist without stealing from artists. That's the connection they're making, right? Now, I very much disagree with this notion, and I'll give a few reasons why. And I've thought about this a long time. When it comes to any form of artwork, except, like, I guess the very, very first, like, we go back to the ancient history times, like, when it comes to most art, people are either subconsciously or consciously influenced by other artists, whether it's, the greats or their mate who happens to be good at art. Fundamentally, they may be... I need to stop saying the word fucking fundamentally. We
have to put a counter on screen, bro.
Hell no. They're going to be influenced regardless. And so my logic is this. Is it theft if I see a Picasso and I imitate his style to do my own artwork versus if I enter his artwork into an AI generation tool and it generates an artwork that is different than Picasso's but in the same style? What is the difference between the two except the manual labor? Like, I don't see that as theft because I see the human input and the AI input as being basically the same, except for the fact that the AI input required less manual labor to do.
I think you've got a few wires crossed here, respectfully, because I've not seen that argument before. This is a new argument to me that the final product is the theft. I've not seen that argument before. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm sure that does exist. It seems like you've done.
No, sorry. The theft is the training of the tool to do replication.
Okay, great. Yeah, then I think it's theft because you're using this in order to create a mass amalgamation of data to produce more output. I don't think the final output is the problem. What you do with it, yes, that can be, but in isolation, the final output is not theft. No. But when it comes down to how that model was trained, as you said, then I think by definition, yeah, it is theft. I really, truly do believe that.
Okay, so if I, as just a normal human, saw online a copyrighted image of an artist's artwork, which I didn't pay to license or use, and I saw it and I thought, wow, that's really cool. I love that. I'm going to do my own. And then I took out my canvas and I spent the hours to paint it up, and it mimics the style almost identically, but it's my own artwork. I've just imitated their style, basically. What is the difference between doing that and me entering their portfolio into an AI tool and basically getting the same thing? What's the difference between the two?
Okay, if you were to say, let's say you really liked Harry Potter.
Yep.
Really liked Harry Potter. You loved it. And you wanted to create something in related to wizardry, which is in wizardry, right? You wanted to follow that core concept of the Harry Potter series. If you were to copy the characters' names word for word, that would probably not be great, right? But if you were to just you were just inspired by witches and wizardry, and you admit that you were inspired by Harry Potter, but you sat there, you wrote this whole thing that is totally different. You're being inspired, right? And so I get where your argument is going. Like, surely it's not the problem isn't the tool. It is your it is what you choose to. Sorry, I've got my wires crossed now. Let me just rejig that. So your argument is that if you're stealing, that if you see an artwork and you are recreating, that is not theft, right? You would agree with that?
Yeah, I don't think that's theft, and I don't think generating a new version of Van Gogh's aesthetic using AI tool is theft either. Like, I see them as one and the same. The only difference being that the first example took me manual labor to recreate, and the second example I put into an AI tool. That's the only variable difference I see the two. And so when people say the first is original art using an aesthetic as inspiration, and the second is theft because it's AI and it was trained on stolen art, I don't agree with that second notion. I see them as being essentially the same thing.
So if I went up to you, you'd written this book, right? And I just took it without you saying yes. And I just took it and trained an AI model on it.
Yeah.
Right? Purely on your work. Entirely. And then I published another book and made money from it. What would you think?
Is the content of your book one-to-one to mine?
Well, look, an AI model would probably... If you trained an AI model specifically only on your work, then it would be very...
Let's change your example just slightly so it's more in theme. Say I was an artist, right? And in your scenario, you trained an AI model on my portfolio of art, and it popped out, its own interpretation of my artwork, right? Using my aesthetic, basically, but still different enough. It's not a copy of any of my artwork. It's just like essentially an aesthetic copy, because that's what AI would do, right? If you gave it my portfolio, it would identify some of the core characteristics of my art and then attempt to make its own version of that. And then you sold it. Would I have a problem with it? Is that a fair summary of your question? Just before I answer it.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably fair. Yeah.
Okay, no, I wouldn't. And the reason for that is it's not a one-to-one copy. It's not a replica. I didn't make that artwork that they're generating. I made the artwork it's based off, but I didn't make the artwork that they're selling, right? So they're not taking any of my original works. And so if another example would be if an indie artist repainted what their interpretation of my artwork is, I wouldn't have a problem with them selling that either, because it's not a one-to-one replica. They're not copying it. They're not claiming the design as the creator or anything like that. They're just making a piece of art and selling it. So I don't have any, in my mind, I don't have any copyrighted ownership or moral right to that, because I didn't make it. Either an AI model or the individual did. I just happened to have a nice aesthetic that they liked and took inspiration from to make.
And so when these AI companies who are developing these models are creating their developing tools in order to take all this art out in the open to train their models, so in order for it to understand what genres of art look like, and it's just taking them willy-nilly, doesn't really think anything about it, to create this amalgamation of data, you don't think that there's any problem with that?
No. And I can give you a very good reason for that. I think how we interpret things like copyright infringement and private ownership of digital assets and goods is fundamentally different now because of the creation of the internet. And so let me give you an example, a very specific example of art that could be considered stolen. If I made a YouTube video titled why Mario is so great, and in the thumbnail I used a trademarked, unlicensed, copyrighted image of Mario from Nintendo, technically, by letter of the law, by moral standards, if we're keeping consistent here, I have stolen artwork. I've stolen it. But would anyone that is arguing, including yourself, would anyone arguing that AI is stolen because it's trained on that also simultaneously argue that thumbnail was stolen? Because I don't think anyone would have a problem with the thumbnail, but I think people would have a massive problem with the AI model using the art to train on. And so for me, to stay consistent, I have to say I don't have a problem with the first example, and I don't have a problem with the second example.
I mean, yeah, I see the point you're making. When it comes to I think it really goes down to the size of the transgression, right? Like, ultimately, that thumbnail, like a percent of it, let's even be generous and say 10% of it is the subject of this stolen art. Like, by definition, yes, it's stolen, but how much of that?
Well, how important is a thumbnail for a YouTube video, Max, would you say?
Very important.
Very important. So if I make a YouTube video about Mario, presumably there's tons of them on YouTube with 1 million plus views, right?
Absolutely.
If I just Google Mario, there's probably 1 million of them with unlicensed, trademarked use of a Mario character in the thumbnail, right? How would you be comfortable if it was your art in that thumbnail that people were profiting off of and probably making tens of thousands of dollars? Because for me, if it's a thumbnail, I wouldn't give two craps. But if you're staying logically consistent here on your pathway, you should have a massive problem with that, because someone has taken your art, put it in their thumbnail, and then generated thousands of dollars doing whatever. The content of the video is irrelevant because they've used it in the thumbnail, and people, that's a big part of why people clicked, and that's unfair. Right, in your frame of mind. For me, I don't see that as a problem. I don't see AI generated art as a problem, as long as it's not copying one-to-one and not claiming ownership of that style or aesthetic. I don't have a problem with that at all. I see it all as kind of a use case of inspiration on the internet. I don't see a massive problem.
Put myself into the shoes of a video game developer. If I could still have a problem with it, but it would be incredibly fucking dumb of me to take down a video and say you're using my art, even though I would have the legal right to do so in, let's say, 80% of the cases. I would have the legal right to do so. That would be incredibly fucking stupid, because it would be free traffic being taken down. So in that argument, yeah, I do agree with you, but I would still... I think when it comes to the AI argument, it is very different. It is fundamentally a completely different concept, because one individual making a thumbnail to generate, let's say in the Mario example, 1 million views on a video, just for example's sake, whereas a massive company like Google training their AI model on potentially hundreds of millions of pieces of art without any permission, that just seems so like a bit dystopian, no? Like, it just feels wrong.
Well, let's take it up to that extreme. Presumably, on YouTube, there's a Mario video with a Mario asset in the thumbnail that has 20 million plus views. That's many millions of transgressions, isn't it? For that artist that did that original piece. Wouldn't you be furious?
Per view, no.
Wouldn't you be absolutely seething because there's been 20 million views, 20 million infractions, so to speak, of stolen, quote unquote, stolen art in the thumbnail.
20 million? I'm not sure I'm following that train of thought, though.
What do you mean?
Where does the 20 million come from? Like, the view count? Why?
Okay, if I go on YouTube right now, do you think there's a Mario video with a Mario unlicensed artwork that's 20? Okay, 100%. So in your example, the scale is the problem. If the scale is the problem, then why don't you see that as a massive
I was missing
issue?
that connection. Sure. Because it's the number of pieces of art that were stolen, no? Rather than just one thumbnail.
Why does that matter?
It is on such a large scale that they're just taking so much art, so much human creativity, and just funneling it all into this one, I guess, corporate conglomerate of data to produce more corporate garbage. Like, it doesn't feel right, I think is the core of my argument. Sure, that perhaps I'd have to concede and say the difference is there is no difference between the two concepts, but at the end of the day, it doesn't feel right that a massive company is just able to take so much art without having to pay for it, without having to credit it, without having to. I'm showing my credit card in the video. Good one, me. It just doesn't feel right that the company is just able to do that. They're just able to go, yep, mine, yoink. Like, it's just not. It doesn't sit right with me. And yeah, as I said, maybe I have to concede that I would have to have a problem with it. But again, it goes back to the idea that would I actually take action on it? I think those are two different things in that.
And just to finish off that final, I'll give one final rebuttal. You can provide one final rebuttal, then we'll call it there.
Yep.
But on that, I don't. What have they stolen exactly? So they've trained. They've
the YouTuber or the
entered.
Company?
No, the company. Let's use your example, right? Google. Sure. They trained an AI model to produce images, right? And to do that, they had to funnel a bunch of images from Google Images of art and this and that to train it, right? Why is that art being quote unquote stolen if the end result is that the output is not 1-to-1 to the stolen art in question? If I'm not recreating the art, it's just learning from the art. How is that any different than an art student going back through the history and seeing all the different artworks and then taking mental notes of what they did really well and then using that in their own artwork? I don't see that as being stolen because they're not recreating that artwork. They're essentially just training a model on what art is, how art works, etc., so that it can almost swore there. It can poo out its own versions of artwork as people put in their prompts. How is it stolen?
If I go to Bunnings and I steal a plank of wood, 2x4, and then I go and make something out of that, it doesn't matter what, just bear with me.
Okay.
You go and make something out of that. What would you say? Would you say that
it's stolen?
Stolen?
Yep. It's stolen.
Correct.
Yep.
So how is that any different to a company taking people's art for free, without their permission, to train their model? They are making something else with it, yes, but they're still taking something.
Because your analogy is flawed, quite frankly. The correct analogy would be if someone went into Bunnings, saw all the different tools they could use, and saw all the different images of things they could build, then they went back to their house without taking anything. They took the knowledge of seeing all of it and then made it themselves. That would be the correct analogy. So now I counter to you, Max, in that example, is that theft?
I'm still a little confused as to how that's...
Because Google, when training their AI model, right, they're not recreating, they're not taking the wooden plank, right? They're essentially telling their model to look at it and say, okay, this is a wooden plank. Do you understand? Yes, I do. I'm going to go make, now, when I enter my prompt, it'll make its own wooden plank, right? They haven't taken it. They haven't copied the wooden plank 1-to-1. They've essentially taught it what it is, how it works, what it does, and then the model understands, okay, now I can make my own. Now when someone enters the prompt, I want a wooden plank, I can produce what I think a wooden plank would be. So in the analogy, it's not someone walking out the store with a wooden plank, it's someone going into the store, seeing the wooden plank, seeing how it's constructed, then going home and making their own version of it. Is that theft?
But by definition, no. But I don't think that's the correct analogy. But
how so?
If you are taking when a tool takes a piece of art to train the model, it is taking that and using it, and it is processing it and using that in its data thing, because it will eventually output something that has its likeness, right? And so if I steal a plank of wood from Bunnings and I go and build something with it, that plank of wood is still stolen, right?
But it's stolen though, because you've taken something that they had for sale. This is another problem with your analogy, to be honest, but you've taken something they had for sale and you've walked out the store without paying, and now they've lost money because they can't sell that themselves. So in your scenario, right, with artwork, the model isn't taking the art and substituting it. People can still sell that art. People that own the art can still sell it and do whatever they want with it. It's not gone missing. They haven't lost the value from it. The model has essentially just seen the art, been fed the art and to learn, and now the model is going to make its own thing. So your analogy...
That is a fair rebuttal. That is a fair rebuttal. I think that's a much better way of countering what I said. 100%. Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, do you have any closing rebuttals or thoughts before we conclude today on this productive discussion?
Very productive. I think it's very sad to see the industry go down the path of taking up AI so much more, to the point where in 10, 15 years' time, we may see the scale of a AAA game made by a team of 3 or 4. We may see the next Grand Theft Auto be made by a team of 5 people, Like, that's an extreme analogy, I admit, but you get my point, right? I would still much rather play a game made by a team of however many people than by an AI. It would just feel mass-produced. It would not feel as special. If Grand Theft Auto 7 was followed up immediately by 1,000 other copies because everyone has the tools to do that, the actual Grand Theft Auto would not feel anywhere near as special. And so I just think overall, artificial intelligence in the creation of visual assets is definitely unhealthy for the industry, but AI use overall and its gradual uptake will have a negative impact on the industry.
Okay. And in summary, I basically disagree with Max wholeheartedly.
It's going to be a constant theme, I fear.
Hey, that's what we do on this channel. We argue ideas because it's fun and productive to discuss it, and to debate and have clashing of differing opinions. It's what society should be. Isn't that right, people watching this video? No, look, to close out on my half, I don't see... I see it very much as a tool in the toolbox. If you are over-reliant on one tool, the end product will be bad, and that's a problem because the consumer's paying money for it. So if someone is using AI in a way that improves the final product, I do not see that as being bad for the industry. But what do you say, commenter? Who was right and who was wrong? Because that's how these things work, isn't it? There has to be someone right and wrong. So tell us in the comments what you think, whether you agree with Max or whether you agree with myself. What do you think about AI? Contribute to the discussion, and we'll read all of them, because we're starting from zero here. So it's literally impossible for us not to see it. Be the first to act.
That's it. Be the first.
And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on screen now, because I think you'll find that these debates are quite fiery in some instances. So definitely do that.